Let me tell you something most people won't. You don't owe everyone access to your life. We walk through this world believing it's our duty to satisfy everyone, to answer every message, to keep showing up for people who stopped showing up for us a long time ago. But today, I want to speak directly to your soul. It's time to stop giving keys to those who continually break into your peace. Every individual you allow into your inner world has an effect on your spirit. And the truth is, many of us aren't tired because we're overworked. We're exhausted because we're surrounded by too many voices that don't come from God. There comes a moment in your journey where honesty becomes a necessity. Not just any honesty, but raw, unfiltered truth about who is lifting you and who is quietly holding you down. Not everyone in your circle is there out of love. Some are only there because they crave your light, your energy, your spirit. And their only mission is to drain it. You know who I'm referring to. The ones who only dial your number when they're in trouble. The ones who vanish when you're in need. The ones who smile when you stumble and grow mute when you rise. Yet somehow we still keep them close. We convince ourselves, but they've been in my life forever, as if time automatically equals loyalty. Some relationships have passed their expiration date, but we keep trying to reheat them in the microwave of nostalgia, hoping they'll feel fresh again. Let me ask you something. What are you losing by keeping these people in your life? Your focus? Your rest? You can't be restored in the same atmosphere that broke you. That means it's time to make difficult decisions. Yes, they might feel like rejection. Yes, they might make you seem unkind, but there is absolutely nothing cruel about choosing peace over pain. When Jesus walked this earth, he didn't waste time trying to make people understand his worth. He didn't explain himself to those who doubted. He didn't chase after those who chose to walk away. He was aware of his mission. He understood his purpose, and you must too. The people who are meant for your life will never require you to shrink, compromise, or constantly prove your value. Those who are meant to be part of your future will honor your silence, your growth, and your boundaries. Because access, true access, is sacred. Not everyone deserves it. You wouldn't leave the front door of your home wide open for strangers to enter uninvited. So why do you allow strangers to walk into your emotional, mental, and spiritual spaces without permission? Guard your space like it's sacred ground, because it is. Life isn't a popularity contest, it's a purpose-driven mission. And if you're continually surrounded by people who distract, discourage, or drain you, how will you ever grow into the person God designed you to be? Many of us have allowed emotional clutter to build so high that we can no longer hear God clearly. He's been speaking, he's been calling, but the line is constantly busy. Too many of us have people on the other end of our spiritual phone lines who should have never had our number in the first place. Maybe this season is about that. Maybe God is leading you into stillness so that He can speak without interruption. Maybe He's instructing you to ghost certain people, not out of bitterness, but out of obedience. Because what He's preparing to do in your life requires your undivided focus. It demands clarity. It calls for separation. You're not being mean, you're being mindful. You're not being selfish, you're being strategic. If the access someone has to you is costing you your peace, your joy, or your calling, it's too expensive. Shut the door, block the number, silence the noise. And don't feel sorry about it. You've carried too many burdens for too long. You've said yes when your soul was begging you to say no. You've tolerated what God clearly told you to release. But now is the time. It's time to walk away from those who no longer align with where you're headed. Let them wonder. Let them speculate. Let them whisper. You owe no one access, no one an explanation, no one an apology. There's a season for speaking, and there's a season for silence. Too many of us have wasted our voices trying to explain ourselves to people who never cared to understand us. Listen to me, silence is not defeat, it's strategy, it's power. It's a declaration that you're no longer playing their game. You don't have to respond to every jab. You don't need to defend your reputation in every room. When people twist your story, when they gossip about your journey, when they misrepresent your truth, the world may expect you to retaliate. But you don't work for the world, you walk with God. And when you walk with God, you begin to understand something critical. Not every fight is yours to fight. Some battles are beneath your calling. Silence is not a sign of weakness. Don't confuse the two. In fact, sometimes silence is your loudest message. When you choose not to reply to drama, when you withhold your energy from senseless arguments, when you stop seeking validation from people who don't recognize your value, you're declaring, I know who I am, and I know who walks beside me. The enemy thrives in chaos. He delights in noise, in confusion, in endless conflict. But God? God speaks in quietness. He leads through peace. That's why sometimes silence is your most powerful spiritual weapon. It deprives the enemy of the reaction he craves. It shuts down petty conflict. It creates room for divine direction. Some of you have been carrying the burden of being misunderstood. You've been striving to correct narratives, to repair relationships that God has already told you to release. But please, hear this. Peace doesn't come from being understood. Peace comes from knowing that God understands. He sees you. He knows your intentions. He hears your heart, even when others misjudge it. Jesus stood silently before his accusers. He didn't argue. He didn't retaliate. He didn't plead for acceptance. Why? Because he knew his purpose didn't require their permission. The same is true for you. Your path won't always be clear to those still entangled in cycles you've broken free from. And when you begin to choose peace over popularity, calling over comfort, and stillness over performance, yes, they'll say you've changed. That's okay. You're not who you were. And you're not interested in going back. Some of you are in a season where God is pulling you into silence, not because you're being punished, but because you're being prepared. Silence is the training ground for your next level. It's where your faith is fortified. It's where your spiritual strength is renewed. It's where your clarity sharpens. In the silence, God builds something inside you that can't be shaken by the world's noise. And yes, the silence may feel lonely. It may feel like everyone has forgotten you. But remember this, God does his best work in the dark. Seeds don't grow in the spotlight. They grow hidden, underground, in quietness, in the unseen. And when the season shifts, what God planted in you will rise, not because you shouted the loudest, but because you were rooted the deepest. You don't need to be more vocal. You need to be more grounded. You don't need to chase approval. You need to protect your peace. And sometimes that looks like walking away from everything that disrupts your stillness. Not out of fear, but out of wisdom. Because you've learned that peace isn't found in always having the last word. Peace is found in trusting that the last word belongs to God. So, the next time someone tries to pull you into conflict, the next time you feel the urge to react or defend yourself, take a breath. Pause. Ask yourself, is this worth my peace? Is this worth my energy? Or is God calling me to be quiet so that he can speak louder than I ever could? Let them talk. Let them speculate. Let them misjudge. You remain focused. You remain steady. You remain silent. Not because you're weak, but because you have faith. because you understand a hard truth that many shy away from. Growth demands separation. You cannot stay in the same circle, doing the same things with the same people, and expect transformation. At some point, you'll have to leave what's familiar. You'll have to let go of what's comfortable. You'll have to step away from what's convenient and walk toward what's divine, carrying only your faith and your obedience. And yes, that's hard, because we are creatures of connection. We treasure our bonds. We cherish our shared pasts. We confuse closeness with calling, thinking that just because someone's always been there, they're meant to stay. But that's not always how destiny works. Some people were meant to help you survive, but not to help you thrive. They were part of your past chapters, but they can't play a role in the one God is writing now. And when God begins to prune your life, cutting off habits, relationships, opportunities, it's painful. It feels like something is being taken from you, but in truth, something greater is being prepared for you. But it's not punishment, it's preparation. God is making space. He's removing what's been holding you back so you can rise. Because what He's chosen you to carry isn't for everyone to handle. What He's planted in you isn't something everyone can support. That's why not everyone can come with you. That's why when your purpose gets clearer, the crowd starts to thin. Think about Abraham. When God told him to go, He didn't provide a map. He didn't list out the stops. He simply said, leave your country, your people, your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. That's faith. That's separation. That's how a legacy begins, with a decision to walk away from comfort and step into destiny. Some of you are hearing that same call right now. You sense it deep within. God has been prompting you to create distance, to stop going where you used to go, to stop speaking how you used to speak. And you're wrestling with it, not because you lack faith, but because separation often feels like abandonment. You're afraid of isolation, afraid of being misunderstood. But hear this clearly. You are never truly alone when you are walking in step with God. Sometimes the solitude you feel isn't isolation at all. It's elevation. God is pulling you aside to lift you higher. And yes, it might feel like you're losing everything. Friends begin to disappear, the calls slow down. You're not included like before. But that's all part of it. That's God pruning your life, removing what's unnecessary. It's His way of saying, this next chapter is too valuable to carry extra baggage. He's not punishing you. He's being precise. He's safeguarding your purpose. The truth is, some people can't embrace the whole healed version of you because they were only comfortable with the broken version. They liked you when you doubted yourself, when you settled, when you accepted disrespect. But now you've grown. You've started honoring your peace. And that threatens them. Let them be unsettled. Let them talk. Let them walk away. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for healing. Don't allow anyone to shame you for choosing peace, for choosing obedience, for choosing what aligns with God's plan. You're not acting superior, you're just in a different season. A season where you finally take your calling seriously. A season where distractions have no place. A season where you understand that being close doesn't always mean being called. God is calling you upward, and with elevation comes refinement. It demands self-discipline. It calls for silence. It requires separation, because if you're going to hear His voice clearly, you have to turn down the noise around you. You have to unplug from the people who pull you away from His presence. You have to step out of places that suffocate your spirit. You must walk away from what no longer aligns with the life God is shaping for you. This is not the season for doubting your growth. It's the time to fully embrace it, to lean in, to trust that what feels like loss is actually a gift of love. Because growth will always cost you something, but what you gain in return is priceless. Peace, clarity, alignment with your Creator. It's the kind of peace that steadies your soul even when everything else is shaking. The most dangerous relationships in your life aren't always the obvious ones. They're not always loud or abusive. Sometimes they're quiet. They don't attack you. They drain you, slowly, consistently, without noise. These are the people who constantly pull on your spirit, but never pour into it. The ones who expect you to weather their storms, but disappear during yours. The ones who are committed to taking, but never to giving. And you've got to stop calling that love. There's a kind of tiredness that rest can't fix. It's not physical, it's spiritual. It's the fatigue of always being strong for others, always showing up, always giving and never receiving. It's the emotional weight of keeping connections alive that only survive because you do all the work. And still you convince yourself, maybe this time they'll show up. Maybe if I just give a little more. But you're pouring from a cup that's already empty. That's not love. That's neglect. Of yourself. Some people are drawn to your kindness, not because they care about you, but because they benefit from your generosity. They love your availability. They love the support. They love the space you give them. But when the tables turn, silence. When your heart breaks, excuses. When you need them, nowhere to be found. That's not divine connection. That's manipulation. Even Jesus, full of compassion, didn't heal every person he met. He didn't deplete himself to please people who weren't ready. He loved with depth, but he also knew when to withdraw. He served with power, but he knew how to rest with purpose, and you must learn to do the same. You cannot carry those who refuse to take a step. You cannot rescue someone who runs back into the fire they cried out from. You cannot surrender your peace to preserve a relationship that only thrives on your pain. Sometimes the most compassionate thing you can do is step back, not out of malice, not out of revenge, but from wisdom. Your peace is far too precious to keep handing it over to people who don't cherish it. You've prayed, you've served, you've been present and consistent, and yet nothing shifts. Maybe that's because God is teaching you something. Not everyone is assigned to your future. Some people were only there to teach you a lesson, and when the lesson ends, the relationship must end too. Yes, it's painful. Yes, your heart is big. Yes, you want to believe the best in people, but faith doesn't mean ignoring truth, and boundaries don't equal bitterness. Boundaries are where you end and another begins. They protect your calling. They guard your joy. They are not walls. They are gates. If someone continues to step over your boundaries, disregard them or dismiss them, they're not confused. They're comfortable. Comfortable with you being uncomfortable. You were not placed on this earth to be someone's emotional landfill. You weren't designed to fix people who have no desire to change. There will come a time, maybe that time is now, when God will ask you to lay it all down, to stop explaining, to stop patching, to stop bleeding for people who won't even hand you a bandage. Don't let guilt keep you stuck. Don't let shared history keep you captive. You can love deeply and still walk away. You can forgive fully and still say, this is the end of the road. Because peace isn't just about the absence of drama. It's about the presence of alignment. And if someone consistently pulls you out of alignment with who God created you to be, that's not love. That's sabotage. Guard your soul. Guard your energy. Stop letting people occupy space in your life who continue to leave it a mess. You're not God. You're not anyone's savior. You are not obligated to wear yourself thin just to feel worthy. The ones meant for you will not require constant persuasion. They won't drain you. They'll walk beside you. They'll see your value even when you're not performing. And if someone's presence is tied only to your productivity, then watch how fast they vanish when you stop giving. And when that happens, thank God, because their absence brought you the peace their presence never could. That's not a loss, that's a release. So walk away from the ones who only reach out when it benefits them. Let them exit without bitterness. Send them off with silent grace. Because when you stop watering what refuses to grow, you make space for what's truly meant to bloom in your life. Eventually, you'll reach a point where your silence is not weakness, it's wisdom. A place where your absence speaks more clearly than your explanations. A place where you no longer waste breath justifying your boundaries. Because once you've matured beyond chaos, once you've grown past the games, you understand that peace is not stumbled upon. Peace is something you protect, intentionally. And one of the most powerful ways to protect that peace? Stop explaining yourself to people who never wanted to understand you in the first place. Some don't ask questions to gain clarity, they ask to control. Some don't listen to understand, they listen to twist. They don't want your truth, they want leverage. And every time you try to justify, every time you attempt to clarify, every time you reopen your heart to explain your silence, your steps, your growth, they use it against you. And then you're left wondering why you feel exhausted, why you feel uneasy, why peace feels so far away. It's time to stop the cycle. It's time to trust that God sees, God knows, and God leads. You don't have to keep proving who you are. You don't have to defend your transformation. Walk in your growth, walk in your peace, walk in your purpose, unapologetically. Because the ones who matter won't require your exhaustion. They'll honor your evolution. It's because you're still standing on ground God never intended you to step on. There's sacred strength in quiet departure, not rooted in pettiness, not driven by pride, but born from the need for spiritual preservation. When you leave, not in anger, but because your soul refuses to remain in spaces where dishonor lingers, where your worth is questioned, where your name is mishandled, you're not walking away to punish them. You're stepping back to protect your peace. God never called you to beg for recognition. He never told you to fight for basic human decency. And he certainly didn't anoint you to remain where you're merely tolerated instead of being deeply valued. There's a sharp contrast between forgiveness and foolishness. Forgiveness sets your soul free. Foolishness traps you in destructive cycles under the disguise of loyalty. Sometimes the reason people keep reaching for you, keep triggering you, is because they still have access. They still have your number, your ear, your emotional bandwidth. And as long as you engage, as long as you respond, they know they still have influence. But when you grow quiet, when you withdraw, when you let your absence speak for itself, they begin to see they never had power. They only had proximity. You don't owe everyone clarity. You don't need to post your side of the story. You don't need to gather an audience to validate your choices. Sometimes the holiest act you can commit is to say nothing. Let them speculate. Let them misread your silence. Let them believe their version. Because the truth doesn't always need to be defended, it simply unfolds. And maybe you're thinking, but I don't want to be misunderstood. I feel that, I get that ache. But even Jesus was misunderstood. He was accused without cause, mocked without reason, misinterpreted without justification, and still he remained faithful to his mission. He didn't hunt down every false accusation. He didn't assemble his followers to release a public rebuttal. He kept moving, because he knew the only voice that mattered was his. That's what you need to cling to when your name is under fire, when your silence is mocked, when they claim you've changed. And you have. Thank God you have. Thank God you don't respond the way you once did. Thank God you no longer need applause to feel affirmed. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. That's spiritual growth. When you walk with God, not everyone will understand your direction. That's okay. Your calling wasn't broadcast. It was whispered in a moment between you and your Creator. So stop giving everyone access to the sacred places of your transformation. Let them talk. Let them guess. Let them carry their assumptions. You don't need to fix every misunderstanding. You just need to remain aligned. And when the timing is divine, when the noise quiets down, the same people who judged your silence will be confronted by your fruit. Because fruit doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It just grows. And genuine growth speaks volumes to the spirit while remaining silent to the crowd. Stay grounded, stay intentional, keep evolving. Yes, they might say you ghosted them. They might say you left without notice. Let them. Because sometimes disappearing from the wrong situation is the only way you'll reappear in the right one. Sometimes God needs to pull you away in order to pour into you. And you can't receive fresh revelation while clinging to expired environments. Your silence isn't emptiness. It's God preparing you. It's Him restoring your strength, redirecting your attention, and reminding you that your peace is not negotiable, not anymore. So stop defending, stop explaining, stop handing out what God gave you as protection. Let your stillness speak on your behalf. Let your distance become your declaration, and trust the one who knows your heart to guard your future. There's a kind of transformation that doesn't happen in the spotlight. It doesn't unfold on center stage. It happens in the shadows, in the silence. It happens when you finally choose to leave the noise and turn toward the one who's been waiting for you all along. That's where the real healing begins. That's where you discover that some people had to leave just so you could return. To yourself, to your purpose, and most importantly, to God. Sometimes God will let the wrong voices fade out so His can finally break through. It's not that He wasn't speaking, it's that you couldn't hear Him through the clutter of voices that didn't belong in your future. You kept chasing approval, you kept seeking connection, you kept pouring into relationships that only drained you. And the whole time, God was whispering, "Come back to me." You can't hear divine instruction when your heart is tangled in distractions, when your peace is wrapped up in whether they reach out, whether they respond, whether they remain. That's why stepping away, stepping back from the unstable, the unfruitful, the unhealthy, isn't retreat, it's realignment. That's when you finally start to hear God again. Not faintly, not occasionally, but clearly, powerfully. Sometimes the most spiritual choice you'll ever make is to get quiet and alone with your Creator. Not lonely, alone. there's a difference. Because when you're alone with God, you're not abandoned. You're surrounded by the one who knows you completely. He's not confused by your silence. He's not intimidated by your boundaries. He's not scared off by your broken places. That's where the deep healing happens, not just from what people did, but from what you started believing because of what they did. Lies like, "You're too much," or "You're not enough." Lies that said love must hurt. Lies that convinced you being needed was the same as being valued. But as you go deeper into God's presence, those lies start to lose their grip. There's something holy about the wilderness season, that stripped down, uncomfortable place where every false connection, every toxic pattern, every faulty identity is exposed and removed. It's in that space, empty of distractions, that God reshapes your understanding of who you are. He heals you, not just to move forward, but to move deeper, deeper into truth, into love, into a grace that isn't based on performance, doesn't flinch at your flaws, and never runs when the weight gets heavy. That kind of love doesn't come from people. It comes from God. And when you finally anchor your identity in Him, you stop looking for it in them. You stop waiting for messages that may never come. You stop refreshing your notifications, hoping someone noticed your absence, because suddenly their silence holds less power than His presence. That shift, it changes everything. God never intended for your life to be overflowing with people. He intended for it to be overflowing with Him. And sometimes, in His mercy, He allows a season of stillness, not as punishment, but as purification, to strengthen your foundation, to remind you that your confidence doesn't come from who applauds you, checks on you. When you've been refined in that kind of fire, something in you shifts. You no longer chase attention. You no longer hunger for superficial affection. You're steady. You're settled. Not because life is perfect, but because your spirit is anchored in something eternal. Some people will say you've changed. Let them. They have no idea what it took for you to return to yourself, to return to God. They weren't there for the silent battles, the whispered prayers. And that's okay. Not everyone is supposed to see the process, but they'll recognize the fruit. You may have walked away from them, but you walked straight into the arms of grace. And in that embrace you discovered something no human could ever provide. Your identity, your calling, your stability. Now you can love from a place of wholeness, not scarcity. You can give without losing yourself. You can show up in confidence because you've been filled by the source. So if you've been wondering whether it was worth it to pull back, to go silent, to disconnect from the chaos and return to God, the answer is yes. Yes, it hurt. Yes, it was lonely. Yes, it felt like everything was breaking. But sometimes things have to fall apart, so your soul can finally fall into place.